Omega has lost his flipping damn mind. I mean, we've seen him going off the rails for the last few weeks, but on this episode of Dynamite, I think he's finally gone crazy, and I also think very, very quickly he's run out of friends. However, Kenny Omega is the AEW champion. Kenny Omega is also a brilliant professional wrestler, so I just want to say, Ken, if you need a friend, I will be that guy. And he'll turn me down like everybody always does, but it's okay because I've run out of tears. But my name is Simon Mello, owner of WhatCulture Wrestling. We did just have another episode of AEW Dynamite, so now you're asking yourself, well, does it get it up or does it get it down? I don't know, but this does the broken finger of power, because we are going to go through every single segment, and the good bits indeed will get it up, and the bad bits, that's right, will get it down. So let's up those downs for AEW Dynamite. Obviously, I kind of just introduced the show 71 times. Dynamite kicked off with Kenny Omega taking on Matt Sydal, and my word, didn't Kenny let you know it. Because when he was making his way to the ring, he was shouting, "First match? Really? I can't believe it," because of course he is the champion and he thinks he deserves main event status. Don Callis then joined commentary and said it was wonderful that Kenny was given a young up-and-comer like Matt Sydal an opportunity. When Jim Ross went, "You fool, you moron, Matt Sydal is older than Kenny Omega." I'm not gonna lie, all of this was brilliant. And exactly the same thing can be said for the match itself. You had the added tease here as well that if Sydal did win, he would get a future AEW World title shot. And actually, because of that stipulation, if you were like me, you were like, that's never going to happen. They're never going to let Matt Sydal beat Kenny Omega. But because they were aware that most of the audience would be thinking this, my gosh, did they go out of their way to make you believe, and there was some near falls here. Well, I'll admit it, I believed. Matt pissed off Kenny in the early going, so Omega just went outside like, man, I can't believe it, this guy is rubbish. But he was also super duper mad, so he then got back in the ring, and he tried to hit a bunch of V-triggers, but Matt Sydal kept getting out the way. I mean, he turned one into like a twisting moonsault thingamajig, and then hit Kenny in the corner with the double knees. Unfortunately, once again, all this seemed to do was wind Omega up, because he got back to his feet, and good grief, he took Matt Sydal's head off with a lariat, and at one point I actually think it come away from his neck. And the best part of all of this is that Matt kept managing to get out of the way of V-triggers as well, to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, he's done his homework, he's had it scouted. But it got even better, because then when Kenny Omega finally did hit a V-trigger, especially because it came after like a buckle bomb and a power bomb, you're like, oh, well, that's it. But no. He then countered the one-winged angel into a Hurricane Rana pin, and that was like 2.9999, and it was one of the moments I went, "Bruh," because I thought he'd actually won. And then when he went for his shooting star press finisher, Kenny basically just hit the ropes, so poor Matt Sydal landed on his crotch. And Omega then ran at him again for another V-trigger, but Matt turned that into the most devastating move in all of sports entertainment for another near fall. And at this stage, I went, wait a minute, this is the opening match of Dynamite, and I already feel like I need to lay down. Once again, it just pushed Kenny too far though, so he finally did hit a V-trigger and the one-wing angel, and he got the 1, 2, 3. But it's not like he was peaches and cream afterwards. He was all like, oh, I can't believe it. He'd had his ass kicked. So to sum it all up, both these guys are just tremendous professional wrestlers. And if you want to say this was Matt Sydal's AEW coming out party, well, that is exactly what it was. He rose the flipping bar. Interview with the Dark Order was next, because John Silver is challenging for the TNT title later. And this was just lovely. It was warm and fuzzy in your tum-tum, because Hangman Page walked up to the group and said, John, no matter what happens this evening, just know we're all going to be proud. I cried a little bit of a tear. This is so warming too, because you can kind of tell the story that all of his old friends turned his back on him, but now the cowboy has found a bunch of new buddies who, let's face it, literally are in love with him. Hangman Page was then out here properly for a match with Cesar Bononi, and it kind of just happened. Like, it was decent, it was fine, and it was fun, but Adam just beat him up. He hit the buckshot lariat, he got the 1, 2, 3, and I was like, okay, cool. I mean, the commentators were talking, oh, he's going to be a future AEW World Champion, which he absolutely should be. I mean, he is a star in the making. Hell, he's already a star. But we don't really need to give anything to this. It was kind of just there, but it was fine for what it was. We also seem to be hinting that we are going to do Lance Archer versus Sting. I have absolutely no idea how that's going to play itself out. Because how the hell is Sting going to be able to survive that when Lance Archer practices the style of chucking you through the roof and chucking you through the ceiling? Anyway, he had a little bit of a promo here where he said, Sting, I think you're great. Sting, I think you're the best. Sting, I look up to you. But as far as I'm concerned, now I need to murder you and take you down so that I can take my rightful place on top of the mountain. So yeah, it did sound a little bit like he was gonna kill him. maybe that's his plan. A recap of last week's unsanctioned main event then aired before we transitioned into a promo with none other than Britt Baker. Now, if we transport ourselves back a year ago, it must have been around about 365 days prior to this when she cut that promo on the Jericho boat where she was like, Tony Schiavone, you're nothing but a moron, or whatever the hell she said. And look how far she has come. I ain't hearing no two ways about it. She is officially a star, she is officially the face of the division, and she is officially great. Just ripped into everybody she could, including Mick Foley, saying it took him 20 years to become a hardcore legend, and she did it in just 1 week. And even then said, Thunder Rosa, I hope you're enjoying your victory, because nobody's talking about you, they're only talking about me. She even went after Tony Khan, saying, oh, look at you hiring all these legends for your company when you've got a damn legend standing right here. And also when it comes to initials, you don't need to worry about AEW, because the three that are the most important are DMD. Britt Baker, ladies and gentlemen. So there you go, that's that. She is an awesome heel, she is an excellent heel. You just want to see somebody beat her up, because that's the whole point when you are a bad guy. I'm gonna cement her right now, don't know what that means, but the point is, she is established, and she's only gonna go higher. Then arranged a match between Christian Cage and Frankie Kazarian for next week. And I said, that's fine by me. Because he was passing on some advice to some rookies here, because obviously he's Christian Cage and he knows everything, when Kaz walked up and said, hey Christian, we're meant to be friends, but you haven't even said hello. Also, look at your t-shirt, outwork everyone. I'm not seeing you doing any work. So Chris was like, all right, well, we'll do some work next week. And Kazarian says, sounds good. So that's what we're going to get. The Varsity Blondes and Dante Martin were then in tag team action, and they were the people that were talking to Christian. So I was like, oh man, guys, I hope that you were listening and I hope that you've learned something. Unfortunately for them, they were taking on the Pinnacle, so they really had no chance in hell. So it was FTR and Shawn Spears facing them on the other side of the ring, and actually, to be fair to these three, at first they were doing quick tags, they were isolating Shawn Spears, and it actually looked like they may get the win. But of course it didn't, because it's the Pinnacle, it's the brand new group in AEW, they were always going to get the 1, 2, 3. I mean, they were going to go for a triple dive at one point, and Wardlow just got in the way, and I was like, that's not a very nice thing to do, Ward. In fact, you could even say it was a little bit low. Can't wait till I get fired. This really was the beginning of the end though, because Harwood smashed Dante Martin with a brainbuster, and then Shawn Spears followed up with the C4, and you've got to imagine that's one win, and they're about to get a hell of a lot of them. They also all cut promos afterwards saying, man, we're more than friends, we're family, and we'll die for each other, and this is the Pinnacle, and we're the best thing ever. And MJF was like, Jericho, I'm gonna murder you, and Santana Ortiz, you're gonna be murdered too, everybody's gonna die. And then of course they challenged them to come into the ring, but as Tony Schiavone rightfully said, you know they're not here, you dinguses, because you did a number of them a couple of weeks ago. Throughout all this too, Wardlow also hit that knee top rope finishing thing he did on Griff Garrison, and once again, there was no need for that. So as always, shout out to my man Griff, I hope your face is okay. I really like this group though, and to be honest with you, I like all the groups in AEW because it just makes so much sense that you would have buddies. If you could have buddies, not everybody can be a damn lone wolf up. And speaking of groups, Team Taz are definitely in trouble because we had a video with them here and Taz was like, oh, this video is sponsored by the color orange. Also, forget everything you saw a few days ago. Everything is kosher, everything is happy. Brian Cage, he has said sorry, so now we're just gonna march on down to Happy Town. But all you had to do was look at Brian Cage's face and Ricky Starks. These are not two pleased pups. So I'm gonna guess they are gonna split and we're gonna get Starks versus Cage. And after pondering on it, I quite like that idea. QT Marshall officially then went nuts. I mean, he's been teasing it for ages, but finally he had a microphone in his hand, so he told us all of his grievances, which was mostly that he hates supposed best friend Cody Rhodes because Cody has a super cushy life and poor QT has to work all the time. This obviously brought out Cody because he was like, man, what's going on? You need to calm down, friend. But he was very nonchalant about this. And he said, look, if you want to have a match, we can have a match next week, but I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to beat you up. And in fact, even if I get you in the figure four, I'm just going to let you go. And Cody, if you are watching this, that's a very long way to get to your destination. Just don't put him in the move to begin with. Cody also had his shoulder all bandaged up, which I think actually may be a legit injury, and I bet that ties into this fight as well. But I am very intrigued about this, because Cody was way too cool of a character here. You just know something's gonna happen. The question is what? Marshall is making this work too, because he's one of these bad guys that actually is speaking the truth, but then he gets to a certain part and he completely loses you, because of course deep down, he is an absolute moron. If you wanted me to take a guess, could I see him maybe go into the Pinnacle? My answer is potentially. Up next was the Lucha Brothers and the Laredo Kid taking on the Young Bucks and Brandon Cutler. This may be one of the most ridiculous matches I have ever seen in my life. I mean, if you just want to be entertained with bright lights and fast moves, you need to go and watch this. And also, we've never done this before, but in the context of just one match, we've got to start a dive counter because there was so many dives. And I ain't hating either, it's just an observation because believe you me, I had a rollicking good time. And we started off with Phoenix and Nick Jackson, who just reminded you that they are some of the most athletic people in all of professional wrestling. But then Matt Jackson and Penta were basically doing the same thing, and the Laredo Kid and Brandon Cutler. This was just a copy and paste, and by the end of it, I was just clapping away like, my word, they're so talented, I love them all, would you please give me a hug? Phoenix, as ever, was the most bonkers, and he was able to take down both of the Young Bucks with a springboard double arm drag thingamajig. And that's when it started. Because Penta hit a dive on everybody, so that's one. So then Phoenix tried to follow up with another dive, but he got cut off, but I'm going to count that as two, which allowed Brandon Cutler to have his window of opportunity, so he threw himself over the top rope, and that's three. Kid then felt left out, so he did a moonsault off the top of the rope, so that is four, before the Young Bucks were like, man, we got to get this back in the ring. And I think they hit the Motor City Machine Guns finisher, but obviously they haven't mastered that, so they only got a two. Everything from this point on, though, was just so mad. Again, you've just going to have to go and watch it. You can't have me recap it, because I'll say things like Phoenix did a reverse 619 and then bounced off the canvas and kicked Nick Jackson right in the head, even though he absolutely defied physics. And talking of Nick Jackson, around about the same time, he did one dive out of the ring, he then got back in the ring and he did another dive. I was laughing away. I was so sports entertained, so it goes up to 5 and it goes up to 6. This also somehow distracted everybody, so Matt took out Phoenix with a springboard TDT, but they went tumbling over the top rope, so I'm calling that another dive, and that is 7. And then back in the ring, the Laredo Kid hit the most ludicrous looking Spanish fly you've ever seen from the top on Brandon Cutler, and he got the 1, 2, 3. And I'll be completely honest with you, I was hooping and hollering, a Spanish fly won a match. That is absolutely something we should do more of. How is that not a finishing maneuver? As quick as you could say the word broom though, out came Kenny Omega, and honestly, not only had he just had this great match, but the fallout and the aftermath, well, it was just so damn good. Because he went and booted the Laredo Kid straight away, because obviously they've had feuds down in AAA, before he turned to Matt and Nick Jackson and told him how upset he was by their actions. Because when he joined All Elite Wrestling, he didn't join it for Tony Khan, he didn't join it for AEW, he did it for Matt and Nick Jackson. And now here we are in 2021, and what did the World Tag Team Champions do? Well, they didn't choose Kenny Omega, they chose stupid Brandon Cutler. His words, not mine. Omega said he was going to give them one last chance to rectify this by giving him a 2-sweet, like it was me in the playground back in the late 90s. And when they didn't and they walked off, Kenny Omega essentially had a breakdown in the middle of the ring, and this character is just absolutely fabulous. He was so out of it though, the Lucha Brothers were back in the ring and they gave him a double super kick before the Laredo Kid gave him that stomp thing from the top rope, which meant, yes, and the end of all of this, our champion, Kenny Omega, was basically on the floor with no friends. And you wanna know why I say no friends? Because when all was said and done, who came stomping out? Gallows and Anderson. And I'm sorry, if they were my mates, I'd be like, guys, you are so late. Look at me, I'm essentially dead. So Omega is making an island for himself, but he just gets better every single week. And when he eventually does lose that title, it is going to be glorious. Jade Cargill video aired next, and she was calling out Red Velvet. And I think she said, I need to beat you, Red, so that I can go and sit on my throne. Okay, you kinda crazy too. However, she did all of this while flexing and saying she's the best. That's why I like Jade Cargill. Sometimes you can just stick to the simple things and they've worked, as we've seen time and time again in the past. She also finished by calling Red Velvet a bitch, and you know what that means in wrestling. Wrestling plus the word bitch equals super serious time. We then got an announcement that Cody and Brandi Rhodes are going to be having their own reality TV show on TNT. Now, I think this is tremendous. Why? Here's why. Because regardless whether you like this kind of thing or not, that's all irrelevant, because here we have two people that bet on themselves and now are just reaping the rewards. I mean, they have a show on a massive network. That should inspire you, that should motivate you, and that should make you believe in your dreams. Like 5 years ago, Cody was still being Stardust. Now, I really like Stardust because Cody threw himself into it, and that's all you need to do with any kind of a gimmick, but he didn't like it. He left the WWE, loads of people didn't give him a chance, and again, now he has a reality show on TNT, and Brandi Rhodes did the same thing. Sometimes you gotta look at the human element, and that's what I'm doing. I don't even care what it's like, but I'm sure it'll be entertaining. This is about what it represents, and now I feel like I need to run through some walls. Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston were then cutting a promo together. these two are just very good together, aren't they? They just strike this great balance between being goofy and being absolute psychopaths, which is basically what they did here. They were very appreciative that the Young Bucks helped them out last week, but what they're more concerned about is ensuring that essentially blood rains down on Kenny Omega and his crew. See, they're cuckoo in the head. It also sounds like they're going to have a proper feud with Gallows and Anderson first, and I think that makes all the sense in the world, because it removes Moxley from the main event scene, you put him in a tag team, there's nothing wrong with that. So all of this was good. We then had an upset, kinda, because Conti beat Nyla Rose, and I never saw it coming. And sure, it wasn't a 5-star classic, but I thought it was really fun, and again, which kind of ties into the theme of this week's episode of Dynamite, it took another homegrown star and ensured she got some momentum, and that's exactly what we should be doing. Rose was using her power to throw Ty around in the early going, but because Ty has judo skills, she was trying to get back into this by putting Nyla Rose in octopus holds. The problem was, Nyla Rose is not an octopus, she is of course a beast, and she kept on powering out. Nyla then ruined her with a knee off the top while Conti was draped over the rope, and that always makes me go rrr. And after Conti had gone for a dive, Nyla Rose got out of the way, and once again for the second time on this episode of Dynamite, just took her head off with a clothesline. There was a little bit of confusion towards the end as they went for the most devastating move in all of sports entertainment, but I was actually pleased that it was a little bit messed up, because it meant that wasn't going to be the finish, especially because do you know what the finish was? A DDT. So that's a Spanish fly, that's a DDT. I mean, I think we're calling it the DD Ty, obviously, because that's her name. But I don't give two hoots. It looked really good, it got the victory, and it got me excited. I want all of these moves to come back. Rose was gonna beat her up afterwards because she was so mad that she had lost when Shida came out to make the save. But then, poof, in the ring, there was the bunny, and she was kicking everybody's butt too. Matt Hardy then walked onto the rampway and made it very clear that not only are the Butcher, the Money and the Blade 100% in his crew now, but that women's title tournament thing we did was absolute baloney, because do you know who wasn't in it? The Bunny, and that's not fair. I was like, actually, that's a very good point. I really like Matt's new group as well for all the things we talked about earlier, especially because they weren't done here on this evening, but we'll get to it in about 2 minutes. We then learned that the match between Miro and Kip Sabian versus the Best Friends next week is going to be called Arcade Anarchy, which makes sense because it's going to be surrounded by video games. And we had a video package with Scorpio Sky saying, "You're not seeing a new side of me, you're just seeing a different side, and I'm going to go and destroy everybody." And I hope he does. And on the down low, I hope at some point very soon, he becomes a TNT champion. He is really, really good. We then had our main event, which was Darby Allin defending his TNT title against John Silver, and this is exactly the kind of thing we should be doing when it comes to the TNT title. It makes it feel like a big deal. The best thing about it too is that we took two guys that AEW have been grooming over the last year or so, and we put them in the main event to close the show. So if you want to go, I can't believe they brought in the Big Show, I can't believe they brought in Christian, I can't believe I put in this guy and this guy and this guy, it doesn't matter because we are still growing young talent. Again, it was John Silver versus Darby Allin. They also had what I thought was a very entertaining brawl, the only real sad bit being that halfway through, John Silver did suffer a proper shoulder injury, and you could tell that it took the wind out of his sails because I was kind of flapping around like it had come loose. Before that though, he was absolutely wrecking Allin, which was also cool because neither of these guys are particularly tall, so in most matches they wouldn't be able to be the powerhouse, even though John Silver is like the stockiest man ever. But here, he was clearly the bigger dude, so he was allowed to take on this role, and he was really good at it. The Dark Order were also at ringside, so at one point Sting came out to make sure they weren't going to do any shenanigans. And this is yet another reason, another tick box, why I enjoy groups in AEW. Doesn't matter if you're good guys, doesn't matter if you're bad guys. If you have somebody who's watching your back, they're gonna watch your back regardless. There were some awesome near falls during this too, especially when Darby Allin went for the stunner, but Johnny Hungy turned it into the Queen Slayer, which is Anna Jay's finisher. And by the time the commentary team was saying, "Man, Silver better speed up because we're running out of TV time, and if that happens, Darby Allin retained his title," I was absolutely locked in. Allin just threw himself off the top rope at one point onto the Dark Order, which kind of surprised me, so I enjoyed that likely more than I should. And then, my word, we hit a triple header. Because I already mentioned the Spanish Fly, I already mentioned the DDT, and Darby Allin retained his championship here after hitting a Canadian Destroyer, after hitting a Code Red, and I've already made my feelings about these moves very clear. This was a wonderful way to get the 1, 2, 3. Madness was just around the corner though, because after these two had fist bumped to remind you there's respect there, Matt Hardy somehow transported himself to ringside. He grabbed Darby Allin and he absolutely bit the shit out of him. It also meant that Dynamite ended with a post-match brawl because Matt Hardy's group was out here and Sting was out here and the Dark Order were out here, which means we bring down the board, it goes up to 5. That's kind of a lame counter. Also, especially because I love a post-match brawl. When you do it right like this, it just looks really exciting. I'm gonna presume as well this now means our next TNT title feud is gonna be Darby Allin versus Matt Hardy, and Darby Allin will win that because of course he will, and what a scalp that is, it's only gonna help Mr. Allen's CV. There is just one thing we do need to talk about before we do end this week's episode, and it comes in the form of Jim Ross, and I just want to make this very clear. I think JR is great, I think he is a huge asset to AEW, and I think he is damn good at his job. However, with all that said though, on this evening, I kind of felt like he went a little bit too far when it came to calling wrestlers idiots. Like when they didn't do a good enough cover because they're arrogant heels, they're morons. When they went to the top rope, they're idiots, they're morons. When they did a dive to the outside, they're idiots, they're morons. He was just sitting there going, oh, what a fool. You deserve to lose. And if I'm watching real sports and somebody does a bad pass or goes to score in the goal and misses, I don't want the commentators to go, what a loser, what an absolute fool. That's just what happens, and especially in wrestling, when it is so personality driven, like Nyla Rose, for example. I don't always want her to do a cover with a hook of the leg. Sometimes I just want her to put a foot on somebody like Chris Jericho back in the day. This really isn't a long-term problem. It just stood out to me much more on this week's episode of Dynamite. That's why I got to give it a down. But again, just to make it clear, Jim Ross, the best. Which brought us to the end of another AEW Dynamite, and this is one of the best shows they've done for ages. You had legends, you had new guys, you had good matches, you had that one that had 70,000 dives. I felt very happy when this was over, and that's why I'm giving it an up. Now, don't forget to leave a comment below and let us know what you thought about last night's episode of AEW Dynamite. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Head over to WhatCulture.com where you can read even more about AEW. Make sure you give us a follow on social media, and if you want to hang about on the channel, there's some videos. Give them a click. My name is Simon for WhatCulture. Thank you very much for watching me always. I'll see you on the next one.